In this episode of Ororua, James Webster is joined by Salvador Brown, a musician and oro practitioner who explores his passion for oro and how it is connected to his whakapapa in Te Moana Nui Kiwa, ki Haamoa. With a passion for oro and musical traditions that are spread throughout the Pacific, Salvador discusses how the oro, the vibration, the musical traditions in the Pacific are very closely related, and how the different traditions have changed through the epic journey to Aotearoa from the Pacific. Nō reira e te iwi, whakarongo mai.
Nau mai kia hau manu e.
Mā te atua e manaki tiakana ia taua, ia tātou I tēnei wā. Ko taupaia I tēnei o nā kōrero I runga I tēnei te ororua. Mā te atua e manaki, mā te oro o te rangi, te oro o te whenua, te oro o ngā atua, te oro o te tangata, ko tauai, ke wainganui a tātou I tēnei rangi. Neira te mihi a kiki a koe, Salvador, pai te, te whakarite I a koe I te ara mai te kōrero ki hau manu, ki ngā tangata e whakarongo mai nei, ki tēnei o nā kōrero e tātou, e pāna te ao pūoro, e tō haerenga, tō manawa, e pāna tēnei kaupapa ngā taonga pūoro. So welcome. I'm sitting here today with Salvador Brown, and privileged that he's taking the time to come and share some of your kōrero with us, bro. And so look forward to our conversation today. So just could you tell us no here koe?
Whaalongo mai. Whaalongo mea sina longo a Samoa, whaalongo mai e mea sina longo a Aotearoa. Whaalongo e ulunga lupe e tangi alo ngongo, whaalongo I ngalu whati o a tangaroa. Se mātangi whe mū ai a o mauli, mū a o. Mahalo, James, thank you very much. Feel very honoured to be here. Feel like I should be asking you all the questions. All the beautiful mahi that you've done. My blood ties me to the islands of Samoa, to the village of Whaliwha. My family name is Alaya Sa. We sat underneath the mountain of Wailima, the purest of waters. And that's what ties me to the great Moana Nui a Kiwa. Also mixed in with a bit of Viking and Irish whiskey drinking Scotsman as well. But through community, I've been very blessed to be whāngai and brought up by many beautiful cultures of the Moana. First of all, a big mihi to the Pacific Sisters. My mother, Rosanna Raymond, who's been a long-standing member of the Pacific Sisters, I've been brought up around, and then also lived in London for a really long time, where I was a member of Ngāti Rānana. I did 10 years of kapahaka with Ngāti Rānana, and even did mautaiaha over in Rānana with Maramara Tōtara, who is the English branch of Te Whare Tutoa. And then moved back to New Zealand about 4 years ago. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So, you mentioned Rosanna Raymond, the fabulous Rosanna Raymond, the son of course, fabulous poet and performer, and wahine toa, which I can only imagine has influenced you in your, your creative energies and whatnot. And so, with all these things that you've just talked about, how does that bring you to be involved, or your background in relationship to taonga pūoro?
I'm very blessed. I don't remember when I started playing taonga pūoro. It's been in my house since I was born, pretty much. Te Meringa Hohaia introduced pūoro to the Pacific Sisters and introduced it to my mum.
Right.
And that was at a time she's even told me, when people were still kind of questioning the tapu or tapu-ness of taonga pūoro, and he was one person that said, no, you guys can play. I think there was even a question of if women could play taonga pūoro, and he was like, no, yeah, of course you can. Hene raukatauri and hene pūtehiwe. Don't be silly. But I think there's this story of the first time I played a piece. I was 4 years old. Apparently, I just walked up to a pūmoana and picked it up and played it. And my mum looked at me and was like, hold a sec, you're 4 years old and you can get a sound on a pū. Yeah, so ever since then, I've been surrounded by it. There were other members of the Pacific Sisters, like Carlos Kota, who really nourished me in playing taonga pūoro. And then living in London, was hanging out with Jerome at Ngati Ranana.
Oh, yes, Jerome.
Yeah, exactly. This was many moons ago. That was like 15 years ago. So I got to learn from him. And yeah, I actually even saw Richard talk in London once, which was a real blessing. And the first time I saw him do the ororuarangi, and I remember sitting there and he was playing his putorino, and then he put his voice into it, and just the whole vibrations that came off of that. I remember my hairs going up the back of my spine and going, how did he do that? Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's just like, in my kōrero on my podcast, that's what I talked about. Yeah, the hairs on the back of your neck standing up from just listening to the sounds and vibrations of taonga pūoro. And I just want to take a note here to, just mention, Te Miringa o Haia. He's sort of one of the unsung sort of heroes of taonga pūoro. You don't actually hear his name mentioned a lot, from Taranaki and stuff, but he was also instrumental in, sort of me as well, sort of hanging out in Taranaki in my early 20s and knowing that he was a taonga pūoro player, and he contributed a lot, but he was a real papakainga man, So he didn't get out there like Hedini and Richard and all those sort of the people that I talked most about. But it's got a special place in my own heart for Te Miringa too. He was an awesome fella and really fought gallantly and strong for his people of Taranaki and Pariaka too. So me to you and mentioning Te Miringa. So thanks for jotting that memory. Cool as. So it's been in your life, all this time, and which sounds like a blessing. It sounds awesome, And like when you're saying that you don't even remember, but when did you become conscious about, the Te Ao Pūoro and, because I sort of look down at your box, you've got a nice collection, and I know that you perform and with taonga pūoro and, all those things, and, you're a great player, and really like, what I've seen of you and the experiences and the collaborations, the few collaborations we've had, and maybe you could talk a little bit about when it became a conscious sort of element in your life.
I think I was about 14 and I'd gone down to Takapo to do my potahi grading, and I'd been living in London, and we'd all come over with the ropu from Maramara Tōtara. And on our way back from our grading, we were going through, I think it was Rotorua, I can't remember exactly, and I had some money aside in account, and I saw this pūkaya. This pūkaya I've had since I was 14. And I had some money aside, and I was like, I want that pūkaya. And it's been with me ever since then. His name has changed 3 times because he broke his nose once. So he became Rua Ehu Potahi because he was on my potahi grading. He always wears my tipari for that. And then I actually stopped playing for a bit, after my teenage years, and I kind of turned 18 and everything kind of got put on a shelf, and it was actually mum and dad's house. I'd moved out, and it wasn't till about 5 or 6 years ago where I had this real calling to start playing again and picked it up. And this is one taonga. I've been cheeky. I've even opened his waha a bit because it was really close. So I've kind of opened it up a bit. Yeah. But I was very blessed with my mum that she would my mum works a lot with museums. So she's worked a lot with the British Museum, the Cambridge Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. I just loved saying that name. It's such a ridiculous name. And so my mum would be working with collections inside of museums, and I would be this little 14-year-old kid on summer holidays running around the back rooms of the British Museum or the Cambridge Museum. And, you know, to stop me from being such a little hototu and stuff like that, Mum would be like, ask the lady if you can see some pūoro, you know, or see some whangu or see some of our nose flutes from Haamoa, where my ngafa's from. And those are some of those connections.
Awesome. So it sort of brings me to like a thought of, so you opened up your mihi with native language, Samoan language and stuff. With your journey with taonga pūoro, have you like drawn connections between like Samoan taonga pūoro and Māori taonga pūoro and language as well? You know, do the languages relative to instruments and Māori and Samoan correspond or similar, similarities?
100%. So the first kind of time that happened was Mum was... I work a lot with my mum. We do work with your mum. That's beautiful. With the Savage Club and the Pacific Sisters, and she was over in Hawaii at the Bishop's Museum. So Te Rangi Hiroa used to be the curator at the Bishop's Museum, and he's written a couple of important books for Te Ao Māori and Te Ao Haamoa as well. He wrote The Coming of the Māori, which is one of the people that said, these instruments will never sing again. But he also wrote a book which is called Samoan Material Culture. And his notes are stored at the Bishop Museum in Hawaii. And my mum sends me this picture of his notes with this crazy handwriting you cannot read, And he's talking about a bull roarer in Samoa. And I'm like, we had pūrere. So it was called a lango mumu. And that was the first kind of little seed. So then a few years, once I'd moved back to New Zealand and we've gotten into lockdown, and there were some things, CNZ were putting out some opportunities to do some research during lockdown, and Pacific Sisters, we applied for it and we got it. So I started this project which was whangu tangi. Whangu means something bottled, and tangi, sound, cry. Same in Samoan and same in Māori. And I really dived into all that and had a little meeting with Horo. And he was like, oh, lango. Oh, that's like our name, rango. And he was like, that's another name for pūrere hua. So it really sparked me to really go on this big, amazing journey that I've been going on recently and looking at what we've been calling it mia sina longo, because mia sina is our word for taonga, and longo, same like rongo, whakarongo, is to hear these treasured sounds. For me, from my research, pretty much every instrument apart from the pūtorino, which is obviously very unique to Aotearoa, was in all of the islands. But ours weren't carved as much, They were literally pieces of bamboo. One of my favourite things that I've found is you can actually start to trace the whakapapa of the taonga across the whole of the moana. So in Samoa, we have the utetea. So the utetea is pretty much the equivalent of the mouth harp, the roria. Then you go to Tahiti. The instrument stays the same, but the name changes, and it becomes from the utetea, it changes to ukekea, but the instrument stays the same. Then you go over to Hawaii, and in Hawaii they have the ukekea, but it's no longer a roria. It becomes a mouth harp, it becomes a ku. And then I was like, okay, so it's here in Aotearoa and it's called a ku. I'm like, how did it get the name ku? How did it drop all of this information? And I was talking to Aroha Yates Smith, and she was like, oh, Salvador, there was probably a glottal stop in the front of that u. So that was a ku. So, and the te probably would have been dropped. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the whole whakapapa of a taonga being taken on the waka and changing and moving, a little bit of those kind of whispers, names change and things. And I just thought that's so beautiful. And then with the ku as well, being made from kariao, tuna, or supplejack. I read this really beautiful story of when Maui was defeating tuna, and he chopped up tuna into all these different pieces. He chopped, the head got thrown in the ocean, became the conga eels, body in the rivers became the freshwater eels, and the sinews and the tendons of tuna got thrown into the forest, and it became the creeping, climbing vines. I'm like, oh, that's kariao. So for us, tuna in Samoa is a really important story of Sina and Tuna. It's, well, Sina and Tuna, you know. And his head gets cut off and planted in the ground, and that's where the first coconut tree grows from. And you actually see the face of Tuna on the coconut. Mm-hmm. And I realised there's the face of Tuna on the kariao. In each of the notches, you have the eyes and the mouth, and that's Tuna. It's like, wow.
Awesome, man. That's cool. That's a cool insight, bro.
I think a lot of one of the things that Horo said when we look at what about indigenous music theory, like we're not going, this is A minor, E flat, or that. And he was saying when you're composing something, use our patterns, use our kōrero, use our pūrako to compose the music. So like on my tatao that I really beautifully wear, I have the suckers of the wheke, the octopus. And I was first kind of thinking, okay, so is that like a really straight rhythm thing, you know? And Horo was like, no, you're not quite getting it. You know, think about the way that the octopus moves. The octopus can like swims through the ocean, and it's like you don't have to, you can think very physical about it, but it can also be quite a bit more deeper into the stories. Yeah.
Just talking about pūrako, you know, it's sort of like, yeah, I love te ao Māori in relationship to that, like, you know, the story about tuna and Maui and, you know, and how that influences the way we think about, you know, the world around us and how things have come to be. And pūrako is a great example of that. In terms of taonga pūoro, is there any, you know, what is it you specialise in, or is there a sort of specialty that, you know, you're drawn to relative to your taonga pūoro, like pūrako, any tikanga around what you do, or, you know, like atuatanga pertaining to taonga pūoro? Yeah,
I really enjoy the pūrako. In Samoa, we call it the whangongo, and also the learning the whakapapa of the taonga, I think is really, really beautiful. And seeing our connections as people of the moana, you know. One of the things I think about quite a bit is, so the revival of the waka started in Hawaii with the hokulea, and it's something that spread very fast across the Pacific. And the tātātao using the traditional uhi with the work of Paolo Soloapi in Samoa, and that has again spread across the moana, you know, with many people using the traditional tools. And I think that the mahi of Haumanu has sent that ripple across the Pacific as well, I think. The Hawaiians have done a beautiful job of reviving their music as well. And hopefully I can do a little bit with the Samoan stuff.
Yeah, because I think, yeah, I do remember Erin talking about, you know, going over to Rarotonga and, you know, some of the experiences they had over there, tracing back some of the, you know, the journeys and making connections and stuff like that. And yeah, I always remember some of their kōrero about, you know, the strand of mātauranga Māori pertaining to taonga pūoro, it's sort of broken, you know, like, so by them travelling around to, at their time, the different huis, you know, they talked about playing instruments, and then, you know, one of the kuia would tell a story about her grandmother, you know, so that's like 1, 2, maybe 4 generations back of, you know, like memory, you know, cast back of her grandmother, you know, playing instruments or some information she was given as a kid, you know. And so gathering all that up and then, you know, compiling it so we could have a sort of broad overview of, you know, the instruments in general, you know, throughout the motu. And then by what's happening now, I see is like people are, you know, making it more rohi-based and, you know, more hapu, iwi-based, sort of like, you know, really planting it back into their communities, which is great. You know, what are your aspirations for taonga pūoro sort of moving forward. Two elements to that is, on a personal level, because you say you've just sort of got back into it in the last sort of 5 or 6 years, and then, relative to people in general or communities in general.
Really loving playing a lot at the moment and really pushing my playing. And I remember that's something, when you hear Brian talk about, or Richard talk about, you don't get your finger holes until you can actually get a sound off of it. And taking that even further as well and really playing with especially with ko iwi ko'owo, bone ko'owos, where you can find the space where it can really, that microtonal pushing and playing inside of the ko'owo. I really love that. So pushing my playing, but I'm getting happy with that. And I want to do more making over the coming years, definitely. But I want to help, I want to push other players. I want to try and get some, I'm very jealous of the Wellington scene and their orchestras and all that. So hopefully I want to try and get a group of us together in Tāmaki Makaurau and get some more jamming on, which is good. I'm starting to meet some of the other players.
Awesome.
Just as a side note, to jump back to something we were talking about before, I went to a talk the other day of Nico Hinden and Rongomai Hoskins, and they were talking about the revival process they've been doing with the Aote. And there's something that Nico said that I was like, I love that. What feels right with your hands, and in that revival process, and sometimes you're trying different things, and with taonga pūoro, looking out to the Pacific, experimenting and playing with things that I feel is right. Yeah.
You mentioned, the scene that's happening in Wellington. Yeah, I'm a little bit jealous of that too myself. I've been at it for years, but, they've got a real cluster of passionate people about taonga pūoro, and they're really doing stuff down there, which is great. But, yeah, you get a little bit jelly out of it, But, yeah, love what they're doing down there. It's cool as. Yeah, so have you got any last sort of words you want to share, or any, like tips or, gems of whakaaro or kōrero around taonga pūoro?
There was something that I wanted to mention, which was kind of my scatterbrain. I've got a bit of a scatterbrain sometimes. It's the pi waka waka in me that's just like...
it's an artist thing too. Artists are really scatterbrain at times, for sure.
But talking about before the language, a lot of people that have done research on us, we're always we're the research subjects. Our music can kind of get broken up into this Western construct of idlophones and idlephones and aerophones. When I'm reading a lot of people's writing, like Richard Moyle or Te Rangihiroa, this is how they broke it up in this academic form of writing. And one of the things that has been really freeing for me when I'm researching another Moana culture from a Moana point of view has given me the ability to find so much more little nuggets of joy and knowledge. So when I was like, okay, why don't I try and translate names of things from taonga pūoro into Samoan? Are there anything in the dictionary? Or because there was this guy, George Best, who translated the Samoan language very early on because he was translating it for translating the Bible so they could get the Bible to everyone. So that dictionary has some really interesting little pieces of knowledge in it that have now since faded away from the language. So I was like, okay, why don't I start with just like the simple karanga manu? So we use the word manu as well, but you even heard me use it in the beginning of the karakia. We talk about the ngongo as well, which is the frigate bird, which was really important for people on the waka, because if you saw an albatross, you knew you could be anywhere because they just spend loads of time out in the ocean. But if you saw a frigate bird, you knew you were close to the land because they only would come out and then pop back in to feed their babies and feed their family. So I was going through, searched manu, couldn't find it, and then I started searching ngongo, and I saw this thing ngongo fala, and I'm like, fala is our word for pandanus. That's what we use to make mats from, and a lot of our taonga is like the pū tetere, the harakiki pūkaya. And I was like, oh, so we did have a a little bird caller as well. Because in a lot of the writings of all these guys, they talk about things that are noise makers versus musical instruments. You know, like a karanga manu isn't a musical instrument because it has a purpose and a tool. It's to call birds. So it's not a musical instrument. But I think most of us who play taonga pūoro know that we can get some beautiful music out of a karanga manu. So I think the process of my friend Jamie Waititi says it's re-moanification, no longer decolonization, because we're still talking about the colonizer. And if we take the colonizer out of the picture and re-center ourselves as Moana people in Moana practices, in Moana ways, we will, you know, keep on stepping further and have some more awesome mahi to come. Yeah.
Cool. Oh, well, just in closing, thanks and appreciate your time coming to share your journey and your kōrero with us. It's always a sort of like a challenge and a task to fit a person's life in the 35, 40 minutes of kōrero, and, how do you grab the best thoughts from your being to do that? It's a window in time and a kōrero that we're going to capture and sort of share in our podcast, Ororua. So once again, bro, thanks for being you and bringing your gifts and your kōrero to us. And maybe you could play us out on one of your with your taonga. Yeah, ngā mihi.
Ko te piko te mahuri, ko ia te tipu a te rākaui. Heri tā tangata